Nitai Chaitanya Bole Nachiyamana 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 Nitai Chaitanya Bole Nachiyamana Nitai Chaitanya Bole Nachiyamana Nitai Chaitanya Bole Nachiyamana Hare नीचे है कृष्ण राधे राधिका तो नीचे है Nitai Chaitanya Bole Nachyanaman Nitai Chaitanya Bole Nachyanaman 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 Nitai Chaitanya Bole Nachyanaman Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Thank you very much, Madhuri Sakhi and the ISV youth for the wonderful kirtan. And if you remember, Vaisheshika Prabhu was traveling and the youth, they continued their 7 p.m. Sunday kirtan and they were broadcasting it so the Ma can see it. So thank you very much to all the wonderful ISV youth for giving a wonderful kirtan and also making a very nice environment for the community of ISV. It means a lot. For my heartfelt gratitude, and obeisances to each of you for coming today on Ma's first anniversary, passing away anniversary, and some things it went by so fast, maybe because you're so much absorbed in your chanting in kirtan, so it made it go very fast. And if we remember Ma's mood, what was Ma's mood? She was always in the mood of giving. And she wanted to make sure that we carry on as a kid. She wanted us to carry on of her mood of giving. And apparently, it's not that easy. It's very easy to understand. It's intellectually you can't even understand. But to practice it on day-to-day basis, carry on with her mood, is very, very, can become challenging. My sister was mentioning that, Ma, you taught us everything, except you didn't teach us how to survive it after you. And so how to process grief and how to accept and continue with the mood that she had in the devotional life, in the shelter of Srila Prabhupada and the deities, how we can process that. So we thought, what would be the best gift to Mother was to understand from Vaisheshika Prabhu, our own dear Vaisheshika Prabhu's teachings, that how we can process this grief, how we can carry on the mood that she had, that she dedicated, she practically applied in her life, but how we can carry on in her separation. So I'm very, very grateful that my mother was so attached to Vaisheshika Prabhu and Mother Nirkula. She didn't leave her body until they were coming here. So let's hear that how we can go on in her absence, but in her mood with the teachings of Vaisheshika Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Yes, we'll show the one video first that we can actually see Ma's offering Nrsinga prayer, and her love and devotion is displayed in this video. Hare Krishna.
भौतिक दिव्य आचरित आदि से जाता है। चार कोमल अंगे उन्हें स्वर्ण कर्ण कुंडल पे है, छाती पर दिव्य मणि स्थिति है, हाथों में सोने का आयुध धारण किए, उनके पीले निर्मल वस्त्र का रंग पीले रंग जैसा है। अपने हारों गलमालाओं चमकीली मणियों द्वारा इंद्र देवता मध्य सुशोभित है। अपनी सोच द्वारा भौतिक दिव्य आत्मनिक गुणों की आश्रय जाता है। चार भुजाएं कोमल अंगे उनमें स्वर्ण कर्ण कुंडल पहरे, छाती पर दिव्य मणि स्थिति है, हाथों में सोने का आयुध धारण किए, उनके पीले निर्मल वस्त्र का रंग पीले रंग जैसा है। अपने हारों गलमालाओं चमकीली मणियों द्वारा इंद्र देवता मध्य सुशोभित है। अपनी सोच द्वारा भौतिक दिव्य आत्मनिक गुणों की आश्रय जाता है। चरण कमल सुंदरता से सजे हुए, कमल चक्र शंख गदा आदि से अंकित है। देश जैसे गरुड़ उनकी स्तुति गाहन में लगे हुए, नरसी कवच पढ़ते हुए अपने हृदय में नरसी भगवान सिंहासन पर बैठे हुए रूप में चिंतित करती हूँ। अपना मन स्थिर करके उसमें प्रार्थना करनी चाहती हूँ, हे नरसी भगवान, आप विश्व की रक्षा के लिए प्रकट हुए थे, कृपा से हमारी रक्षा करो, कृपा से हमारी रक्षा करो। इसी स्तंभ में छुपे रहने के साथ साथ सभी जगह पर विराजित है। अपनी कृपा से मेरे माथे की रक्षा करो। आपकी आंखों सूर्य चंद्रमा अग्नि तरह है, कृपा से मेरी आंखों की रक्षा करो। सभी देवों विधान मुनिजनों, आपकी स्तुति दान मेरी स्मृति और बुद्धि को शुद्ध करो। आपकी नाक सिंह जैसी है, कृपा से मेरे नाक की रक्षा करो। आपका चेहरा लक्ष्मी जी को अति प्रिय है, आपका चेहरा लक्ष्मी जी को अति प्रिय है, कृपा से मेरी रक्षा करो, रक्षा करो।
आपकी कृपा से सब काम हो रहा है मेरा आपकी कृपा से सब काम हो रहा है करते हो तुम कन्हैया मेरा नाम हो रहा।
This is the song actually. Mother was reciting the Narsingha Kavacha in Hindi, and this was her constant chanting. She was chanting this. And then there was this Hindi song actually from Vrindavan devotee. And that song basically says that, Krishna, you are the doer of everything. And by your mercy, everything is going on. But you still give us the credit that we're doing it. But allow us to take shelter of your lotus feet. So those who didn't understand Hindi, I just wanted to translate her mood. Hare Krishna. To you, Vaisheshika Prabhu.
Hari Hari. Of course, we don't know in some circumstances whether the clap or be more somber, but my instinct was to see how animated and joyful Haripriya was when she was getting ready to leave, that it's a celebratory time. And of course with Vaishnavas, we have a context of understanding that the devotee who's prepared in service and in consciousness, it's a time to celebrate when such a person then makes a success of human life and goes back home, back to Godhead, and worthy of celebrating. I first offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to my God brothers and God sisters. So happy Satyadev Prabhu and Maguna are here today. It gives me joy in my heart, as usual, whenever I think of them, and especially when I'm in their company. And to everyone here present, thank you very much for attending this very important function, because we are a community and we go through life together. It's not that we just have a goal to do some kind of commerce or together, or even that our services are isolated, but our lives are integrated. And in a successful life of a human being, we have to live together. We also have to know how to die together and how to process it together. That's what brings us closer and closer to the reality that we are passing through this lifetime, and we need each other in order to attain the supreme destination, to be able to go back home, back to Godhead. What to speak of to live in a very balanced way while we're in this lifetime. So with my deepest respect and obeisances to Haripriya Mataji, who inspired me greatly, I came to know about her more and more, because she was a quiet participant in many ways, that as I reminisced and thought about the way that she conducted herself, she was always, and as I found out more, because I'm always in this room, and I don't always know what's going on in the kitchen and elsewhere, that when I come to find out, and what I came to find out about her, as Hansapriya was saying, that she was always in the mood of giving, making sure that the devotees were fed. And I noticed quite a few times that she fed me too. And it was quite miraculous, because within a short amount of time, she would put something together. And it was always a sense of love that I was receiving from her. What to speak of the fact that Hansapriya is somebody that I deeply respect. We've been together since the beginning at ISV. And when you're with somebody for many, many years, decades in fact, and you see their service mood through thick and thin, And we've been through so much together, so many hard-fought battles, one after another is the only way that one advances personally in life and as a community. And I've watched her character, and I can understand where she got it from, her upbringing, her mother, and so forth. And the attachment that you have, Haripriya, to your mother, and that we all feel, but you especially, is not inordinate. It's actually proper. Because Haripriya is a great Vaishnav. She raised you as a Vaishnav, and she also set an example while she was here of how to live and also how to leave the world. So this is an important and glorious day and an important topic that we're going into. The topic that I'm going to speak about is how to process grief. First of all, to acknowledge the fact that leaving the body is part of our existence. This is not necessarily so in all communities. Of course, everyone has to deal with it, but some deal with it more superficially because, first of all, they don't have a lot of information about what happens, what's the difference between the body and the soul, and what it means to actually leave the body. In the Gita, Krishna says, yatanto yoginas chayanam pashyantyatman yavastitam yatanto prakritatmano nainam pashyantya chetasaha. He says those who aren't trained in knowledge don't know what's taking place when somebody leaves the body, but somebody who is trained in knowledge understands what's going on. And that can be very helpful, which I'll talk about in a minute, just from a very practical point of view. Grief itself is a topic. It's a big topic because humans go through this. Of course, animals do too. We notice that when there's a loss of offspring, then animals grieve. We don't know that much about their psychology, at least maybe their pet psychologists who do. But humans have been studied more. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross had written a book on death and dying some time ago. She was a kind of pioneer in the topic of grief. And she and her colleagues who studied it talked about it as a process with stages that one goes through. And of course, since she's put out her findings about the various natural stages that one goes through, people have noticed much more about that. They have acknowledged that there are stages. For instance, one of the stages is denial. There's a sense of not wanting to believe that it happened and just hope it will go away. Like in the case of sometimes something bad happens and then you wake up and it turns out it was a dream and you go, it didn't really happen. And so there can be this sense also of denial when somebody passes away, because it's frankly the most drastic thing you can do is die. And so there's a sense for those who are left behind and grieving that let's just hope that it didn't actually happen. And to remember the different stages. Satyadev, what's the next one? Yeah, then there could be a sense of anger that, why did this happen and so forth. There can be, what are the other ones? There's bargaining, sadness, and what? And acceptance, yeah. So many people who've also studied the subject matter from psychological points of view. There's neuroscientists who look at it also from the point of view of what's happening in the brain and so forth. I've talked about how these stages don't necessarily come in sequence. Sometimes they come out of sequence. Sometimes there are some people that skip certain aspects of it, or they are more absorbed in other parts of it. Nonetheless, the point here is that it is a response to loss that we have in our life, and the way that psychologists and sociologists talk about it is it's a point of losing someone, a person, an animal, or a thing that can cause this sense of grief. Let's look at the origin of the word grief. It comes from Sanskrit, and it comes from the word guru. What does the word guru mean? It means heavy. So grief, and then you trace it back to its origins nowadays. Originally, it means something very heavy happened. And there's a sense of a heaviness of heart, of being overwhelmed by what has happened when we lose someone. And also, interestingly, I looked up the word mourning. To mourn also has a root in Sanskrit. It comes from the word smaran or smaranti, to remember something again and again, to remember something or someone that we've lost. And so that sense of remembrance that turned into the word mourn or mourning has its roots in this in the Sanskrit language also. So I want to first go to the Bhagavatam, first canto, 8th chapter, verses 1 through 4, to talk about the context of our wider Vedic community. Now, when Krishna was present 5,000 years ago, there were definitely situations where the devotees wanted to mourn, remember those who had passed, and also do something about it. So here in the 8th chapter, we have a scene that's described in the next 4 verses. Sutta Goswami said, thereafter, the Pandavas, desiring to deliver water to the dead relatives who had desired it, went to the Ganges with Draupadi. The ladies walked in front. Prabhupada writes, to date, it is the custom in Hindu society to go to the Ganges or any other sacred river to take bath when death occurs in the family. Each of the family members pours out a potful of the Ganges water for the departed soul and walks in a procession with the ladies in the front. The Pandavas also followed the rules more than 5,000 years ago. Lord Krishna, being a cousin of the Pandavas, was also amongst the family members. 2, having lamented over them sufficiently, offered Ganges water, they bathed in the Ganges, whose water is sanctified due to being mixed with the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord. 3, there sat the king of the Kurus, Maharaj Yudhishthira, along with his younger brothers and Dhritarashtra, Gandhari, Kunti, and Draupadi, all overwhelmed with grief. Lord Krishna was also there. Purport: the battle of Kurukshetra was fought between family members, and thus all affected persons were also family members, like Maharaj Yudhishthira and brothers Kunti, Draupadi, Subhadra, Dhritarashtra, Gandhari, and her daughters-in-law, etc. All the principal dead bodies were in some way or another related with each other, and therefore the family grief was combined. Lord Krishna was also one of them, as a cousin of the Pandavas and nephew of Kunti, as well as brother of Subhadra, etc. The Lord, therefore, was equally sympathetic toward all of them, and therefore he began to pacify them befittingly. And 4, citing the stringent laws of the Almighty and their reactions upon living beings, Lord Sri Krishna and the Munis began to pacify those who were shocked and affected. So, I should read part of this purport. The stringent laws of nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be altered by any living entity. The living entities are eternally under the subjugation of the Almighty Lord. The Lord makes all the laws and orders, and these laws and orders are generally called dharma or religion. No one can create any religious formula. Bona fide religion is to abide by the orders of the Lord. The Lord's orders are clearly declared in the Bhagavad Gita. Everyone should follow him only, or his orders, and that will make all happy, both materially and spiritually. As long as we are in the material world, our duty is to follow the orders of the Lord, and if by the grace of the Lord we are liberated from the clutches of the material world, then our liberated stage also, we can render transcendental loving service to the Lord. I'll read more later. A couple points that are important, I think, for us as a community are to acknowledge the fact that it is important to mourn, that is, smaran, to remember those who have left. It's also important to have a sense of context, as Krishna is giving those that who are attending the ceremony of bathing in the Ganges. Also important to have a sense of ritual at that time. So some ritual, some context about what actually happened, and then remembering the person. Okay, so in the process of grief, it's very much advised to process it by discussing it. Also, to acknowledge the fact that we, now I'm speaking in the context of we who are practicing Krishna consciousness, will also go through it. One might think that I have read Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, the wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. Does he not say that? So now we have juxtaposed with that Krishna at the Ganges with all the affected families. Yudhishthira, whose Dharma himself is disconsolate after the Kurukshetra battle, because he feels guilty that I caused this. It's for my sake that this battle was fought, just to make me the king. And what to speak of the fact of the individual losses that took place there at Kurukshetra, because everybody knew everybody. And the war broke out, people were killed, the loss was immeasurable because of so much loss of life. Millions were lost in that war. That has a ripple effect through the whole society. So first point here is that even though we understand the tattva, I'm not my body, and others are not their bodies also. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a science to it. As Krishna says, here's what's happening, the soul's stepping out. It doesn't mean, however, that then we become callous to the emotional effects and the social effects of somebody leaving the world. We should, as Krishna has here, acknowledge it. And we should also have a way of purifying our minds and senses. You know this admonition that one shouldn't perform deity worship after somebody in the family dies because there's a contamination period. Do you know what that means? The contamination period, it's actually the mind becomes contaminated because I'm feeling so much sorrow and grief that I can't really concentrate on my service. I can't offer my whole heart to Krishna when I'm offering a flower. I'm thinking of the departed relative. This is what is called the contamination period. And there's some sense that, okay, take a little time off from your service now so that you can come back to in a, feeling that you've processed this enough. And so you can deal with it. And I like to give the example of the fact that we have, yes, a material body, but we have bodies. We have a physical, gross body. We also have a subtle body. If you cut your arm accidentally, you're going to bleed. And it requires that you put some antiseptic and also a bandage on it, and then take some time. It takes time to heal. And in a similar way, when we lose a loved one, which again is inevitable, especially when you're in a tight-knit community, we're going to lose this part of our lives. We're going to lose devotees on a regular basis. So how do we deal with it? We also have to have a process of purification, sort of the antiseptic, a way of dealing with it, putting in context, and a bandage, and then also taking time. Now, from a lot that I've read about and heard about grief, it's not advisable to tell people when they're grieving to get over it. Just, get over it, or that it'll end at some point. Most of what I've read indicates, and this rings true to me, that you never really get over it, but you move forward with it. And here's how one moves forward with grief. First of all, those who we love, and of course, we can also grieve for those that we don't love that much. We're just attached to them because there are families in which we may have a love-hate relationship with some people. And even if we're thinking of it would be better if they weren't around anymore, once they're not, then there's also a sense of grieving. But especially when we admire somebody, we depend on them, and emotionally they've supported us and so forth. When somebody leaves, there's a great sense of loss that we have. And so it's very helpful then to acknowledge that. And part of the acknowledgement is amongst devotees that you cut your arm, you bleed. You lose somebody, or there's an experience of loss, that also is a kind of cut to the subtle body. And we also have to treat that very deliberately. So that means giving loving support. One of the kinds of loving support is to listen to a person who's processing it. We don't have to analyze it, and we don't also have to prescribe anything. But it is important to be there and to offer emotional support, because we're all in this together. And these things all happen to us here in this world. My personal experience, once when I lost my father, I was in Vrindavan, and some of the devotees who lived downstairs from me at the MVT, when I came walking down, they said, "What happened to you?" And when I told them, they gave me nothing but emotional support. Hugs, and just pouring out of the heart, "We're so sorry," and that kind of thing. And even somebody, a big burly brahmachari walking by, said, "What's going on?" And he even came over and gave me a hug. And that was very healing, just acknowledging. So it's helpful to know in a devotional community that this is what Krishna did. He was there for everybody. And, the hugs were there. The emotional support was there. So we should do that. It's not outside of the process of devotional service to acknowledge the fact that although we're spirit souls, we do have an intimate connection with the gross and subtle body. You don't break your arm and say, just chant Hare Krishna. You do chant Hare Krishna, but not just chant Hare Krishna. Do set your arm in a sling. And similarly, when we have an emotional cut, it's important to acknowledge that and to appreciate the fact that we do have this relationship with this world that will leave us with this feeling of grief or heaviness. Guru means heavy. They'll feel very heavy because of this. And we have this example of Krishna at Kurukshetra, after Kurukshetra, consoling everybody. So next, I want to say a few things that I heard that I found very interesting from some scientists from Stanford who study the brain and who specifically talk about grief. May I do that for a minute? Doesn't sound too clinical? Okay, so I'll look at my notes. They describe a certain part of our brains that deal with space, time, and closeness. And by closeness, it means closeness by emotion. We're close to somebody emotionally. We have a relationship with them, and they matter to us. So that's what closeness means. And so whenever we think of somebody in our lives, the space means like, where are they right now? Like if you think of somebody who's not passed on right now, somebody that you care about, like where are they? We have this constant sense of measuring, like, okay, how far away are they? And the next one is time. How long would it take me to get in touch with them if I had to, right? Have you ever, can you conceive of this when you're processing or when you're doing this mind experiment, this thought experiment, like, okay, somebody I care about, where are they right now? How would I get in touch with them if I needed to, right? So we have that sense, they say, to these scientists, that we have a way of remembering people. And they also talk about episodic memory. There's a way that we remember people according to the episodes that we've had with them in our lives. We've had certain kind of contacts and dealings with them, and there's a composite of that, and that's what we remember. So that's there in our mind, combined with the idea that where are they right now? How long would it take me to get in touch with them? How long would it take me to reach them if I needed to? So what happens when somebody leaves his or her body that's important to us in our life? There's a sense in which we then cannot reach them. In other words, the emotion is still there, that I'm attached to them emotionally, they're very dear to me, but that sense of time and space is now disconnected because, and if you've ever had this feeling, I remember losing my parents one after the other, and then the way I described it was my mind kept walking over a cliff. Okay, yeah, I'll talk. Oh yeah, they're not there. Oh yeah, I'll just call. No, I can't call them. I'll just text. No texting. That isn't there anymore. And so one of the ways in which we become affected by this sense of grief in the mind is because we can't reconcile the fact that they're not there anymore. There was a letter from a scientist who had lost his wife, and he had written a long letter to her that was later published after she had gone. She was deceased. And at the end, he had remarked that, I don't know who to send this to. He had, poured out his heart, saying, like, I haven't found anybody to replace you. I don't think I ever will. And then at the end, as I wrote this letter to you, but where do I send it? Where are you? How do I get this to you? And this is, as these scientists who study the phenomena of grief, this is one of the ways in which we become helped when we have this sense, as they say, of some philosophical way of appreciating where the person's gone. So this comes out of Stanford in talking about neuroscience, and the person that I heard speaking about this said, no, I won't venture into this area because it's not in my ken to go here into the metaphysical. He said, but those who do have a theology that explains, as he said, for instance, okay, the molecules are reassembled somewhere else, or he said the soul actually has gone somewhere else, then one's able to bridge this gap a little more with the sense of time and space. Because if I don't have that, my mind continually walks over a cliff. It's like, I'll get in touch with, I can't. They're not there. I can't connect my emotions with the time and space idea of how I'll be in touch with them. However, as we see here, Krishna has a ritual, and all the devotees there have a ritual, and part of it is, as we know, there's a way in which even after the soul leaves the present body, and you're catering to them in this life, like, you do a Shraddha ceremony, you do a process 10 days after the person leaves, you're supposed to invite a few devotees. Seventh canto says it doesn't have to be huge, can be small, and you make some offering to Krishna. Then you offer that to a picture of your relative. Then you have a kirtan on their behalf. This is for you. And in doing that, there's a sense of solace, isn't there? Say yes. Why is there a sense of solace? Because I am reconstructing this idea of time and space. Okay, if they lived in India, or even if they lived down the street from you, you may have this idea of time and space that I could get in touch with them in 5 minutes. I can even walk over there. But do you? A lot of times people, they have a relative on the planet. It was like, how often do you actually talk to them? Well, every 6 months. How often do you see them? Well, every 4 years. We're a little busy right now, but still the idea that I can contact them is there. So what the researcher was saying was those who have a legitimate idea, or he didn't say legitimate, I guess I'm coloring this, they have a philosophical idea that, yes, this person still is reachable in time and space. They've gone somewhere else. The soul has left the body and gone to a new place. Then I have this way, can I do anything for them? Like Kesha Bharti Maharaj, he wrote about his mother in a Back to Godhead magazine because she had Alzheimer's, and then she became a devotee at the end and accepted a spiritual master from her deathbed. And then to this day, on the anniversary of her passing, he does a big puja at Radhakund. And it's not something he advertised, but I know him very well, so I know what he's doing a lot of the time. And, there's this sense that, yes, I'm doing something for her. He's not exactly sure where she is, but he's exactly sure that she's somewhere. Not that she's nothing, or that doesn't exist anymore, or unreachable. No, reachable, but here's how. So having a composite view of the soul and the body, and then also having a sense of how to process that, how to actually help someone, is immeasurably helpful in the grieving process, because the last thing we want is that, they were victimized by death, and I can do nothing about it, nor can I reach them. This compounds the grieving process very much. So about the idea on a more visceral level of dealing with the loss of a loved one, I also heard some points made by people who focus on this issue that resonated with me, which I'll express as follows. Related to what I said earlier, that the last thing you want to tell somebody is just get over it or just ignore it. No, go through the process and move forward with it. With it means the sense of relationship that you have with the person. For instance, with your mother. Mother has set a standard for you, has raised you, and so forth. So you have this ingrained feeling that I am part of her. I mean, after all, when we're born, we have an umbilical cord, right? That's an amazing phenomena in and of itself. We're part of the mother's body, actually. The umbilical cord, as Satyadev Prabhu has told me, because he's delivered impromptu babies in the backs of taxi cabs and things like that, as soon as the baby takes its first breath, then the umbilical cord starts to collapse, and then they cut the umbilical cord, tie it up, and so forth. And then physically, you have this disconnect from, at least on that level, on that very direct level. Then you're fully dependent on the mother to raise you, take care of you, and so forth. So that connection is always there. But then as you become more independent, there's still a mental or subtle umbilical cord that we have with the mother and the father, or with anybody who's actually a significant person in our lives. And so what happens when they leave is they're part of us. Acknowledging this is very helpful in moving forward with it, not just moving on from it. Because this idea that I'll just get over it. No, you won't. You won't get over it. But you don't have to. You can assimilate this idea, and it's not just an idea, but it's a fact that you're still part of them. In other words, you carry their value system with you, and hopefully it's a good one, and if it's not, you can winnow that out. But, and I'm talking in ideal circumstances here, but you can realize that actually they're living within me. The way I express myself, the way I hesitate to do certain things, it's because I remember no, don't do that now. That's not how you do it. And you're like, okay, I won't do it. And then you realize, okay, I'm living with them. I'm moving forward with them. It's not that I'm forever separated from them. And if you think rationally and very carefully about it, even when we're on the same planet with the person or even down the same street, it's not that we're with them all the time. I've seen so many times devotees in America, and they think, my parents are in India, I have to go there. And they get there, and then their parents are like, what are you doing here anyway? I mean, how long are you staying? And how much can you actually help them or be with them at any given day or time? Of course, there are times in which that's very helpful and necessary, and we should do it. But the idea of it and the actual reality of it are two different things. So we can carry that feeling and idea and the values with us as they move on. And we move forward with their memory and the idea that they're part of me. So all this goes to a couple of points for me, and that is that it's a very mature thing to do in a community, large or small, to acknowledge the dying process, and also to honor the grieving process and let it become integrated as a memory in the community and also in the individuals who are most affected by it. Let them move forward with it. Let the community move forward with the memory of those that we've lost. And that's why these memorials are important. That's exactly what we're doing. We're remembering, what was she like? She was ebullient. Even as she was approaching death. She was in a service mood, put others before us, before herself and so forth. And this is a way we assimilate the value of the person. And then, we have that memory collectively and individually. So grieving means heavy. We should consider it's a heavy thing to leave the world, and it's a heavy thing for when we're separated from people. But it's not beyond the normal process of devotional service. In fact, it's one of the most helpful junctures there are to apply the teachings of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita and to see by his example what he did to deal with grief. So those are a few thoughts. And if anybody just has any particular points they want to make to augment this, we can entertain them for about 3 or 4 minutes. Yes.
I just wanted to mention that in the Srimad Ramayanam there are instances where Lord Ram himself grieves for his father. So when Bharat Maharaj goes to meet him and he conveys the news that Dasharatha is no more, there is Valmiki mentions how the 4 brothers sat down and recalled how Dasharatha used to call them, and they very fondly remember that. Just wanted to share that.
Yes. Yeah, we'll find it in the Ramayana, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, many circumstances. Bali, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Also, in Garud Puran, it is mentioned about the passing of the soul and what happens. So sometimes people say, oh, he's a liberated soul, so what is the necessity of doing or not? So Yamaraj's statement is that whoever is the performer for the sacrifice for the departed soul, if he has gone higher planets, then the return you are getting back to yourself. If he has gone to hellish planet, definitely it is utilized for him or her. If you have gone to spiritual abode, then also you are getting the exact return amount in that proportion. So, and he has mentioned that the first 10 days is likely the transient period where the soul, it's kind of a Christianity also called Judgment Day. So, okay, this, now I give you concession, kind of a 10 days extra that prove me that you are not, because he is giving an opportunity not to go to hell, people. So he's giving 10 days, you give me some pieties that what has been done by your family members. That's why they do all kind of reading Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, charity of cow, donations, etc. Then after that 10 days, they accumulate, present it. If Yamraj is satisfied, then he goes back. Again, he gave concession. In case you are some delinquent of not paying off the debts, then at least this 1 year after that, you perform this Shraddha ceremony where you can do that one. And he gave an example of how this Shraddha ceremony done in that same connection, that when Bhishma, the Pandavas are doing this Shraddha ceremony for Bhishma after 1 year of passing, the next year of the Mahabharata war. So Bhishma personally came because this Shraddha ceremony they're offering. Bhishma's hand came personally, give me the food. But the priest said, no, you need to give the pitra in the pinda, not to the one. Because then other people, those who are associates of the family member, no, Bhishma himself is there, why have to give in the pindas? He is asking in the hand, but no, you have to give in the pinda. Then Bhishma actually blessed them. You did the right thing. That should be done in that way. So there are many ways to define, but these are some of our ancillaries, Puranas, which describe the passing of the soul. So we should not be, dismayed that I am a devotee, I am transcendental, should not do it. Rather than you are also getting credit back by performing some spiritual activity, just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did for his own father by going to Gaya and all. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We may be not well versed in many of these ceremonies. That's altogether possible in Kali Yuga. Nor may we have the proper context in which to perform them. In which case, in the Bhagavatam, Karabhajan Muni says, Devarshi bhutatna nirnam pitrinam na kinkaro nayam ranicha rajan sarvatmana yasharanam sharanyam kato mukundam prihrita kartam. And that is, although we have a debt to our forefathers, and there are many ways in which we are supposed to individually remunerate the people who have helped us in various ways, if you're fully surrendered to Mukunda, then there's also an exemption. Not that we should, eschew doing these other kinds of activities when possible, because they're good for us, they're also good for the person who's moved on. But the best thing that we can possibly do for our relatives who have passed on is to become pure devotees. Because then, as we know from Prahlad Maharaj, who asked for benediction for his father and said, please save him, Nrsingadev said, it's already done. Because of your quality of devotion, everybody in your family is getting the benefit. So that's also a kind of solace that we can keep in mind if we're not able to fully keep up with every single detail and put it in the exact right place. Any other points or questions? Okay, Jagarini.
Hare Krishna. This is a little, it's not really off the point, but my experience with close friends and parents that passed away, it's helpful to remember that if you live a good life and you're kind in your life to everyone you meet in every situation, that is an amazing help for grief, because memories haunt you. And if you have an experience with someone that's negative or something that you might have done to harm them in any way or cheated them or anything that will come up. I just thought I'd mention it because I know that it's been a great comfort in my life when I think back at my close, well, Patty, when she passed away suddenly, and my parents, that I you remember, like you said earlier, those memories, they come forward. So I think it's also helpful to note that it's important to live as Vaishnavas and be kind and careful with each other and gentle with each other. And that's also going to help through grief. Thank you.
Thank you, Jagarini. That reminded me of another point that this presenter about grief from Stanford said. And he talked about the phenomena of guilt. Sometimes when somebody leaves, we might think like, oh, if I had just invited them an hour earlier, they would have missed the traffic light or whatever it may be. And he described this as an unlimited landscape upon which you can become lost, because there are unlimited scenarios you can imagine in your mind in the sense of guilt of how I could have done better for the person. However, there's nothing you can do about it, and therefore it's a futile area to explore and to go into guilt, which is another emotion that survivors have oftentimes, that I didn't do enough. And even if we did not do as well as we could with people, still there's this way in which we can move on as best we can as devotees to benefit everybody, by the process of devotional service. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the hour. We still want to hear from Satyadev Prabhu, Nirakula. We're going to say a few words. So I guess if others have more points and thoughts, then we can continue that at another time, because it's a worthy subject to continue. Satyadev Prabhu, would you like to say something? Satyadev, please say something.
Testing. Okay. Hare Krishna. I'm so happy to be here with my ISV family. And thank you, Haripriya, for inviting me and Maguna to be here on your mother's memorial, 1-year memorial. I have so many thoughts running through my mind. I really enjoyed your talk, Vaisheshika Prabhu. It was very edifying and helpful about grief. I just want to say a few words about grief. I didn't know that it came from Sanskrit, the word heavy. Yeah, heavy feeling in, where do we feel the heaviness? We really feel it in the heart, right? And the heart is an amazing organ. They're discovering so many things about the heart these days, that the heart actually has neurons in it. It thinks. And it's the center of consciousness. And one thing you were saying, how it's important with grief, to deal with grief in an honest and also effective way. And you're mentioning how, having a spiritual philosophy and a community, a family and a community, and having a ritual to process grief is really important, because otherwise you don't move forward with grief. You can get stuck in it. And so one of the things I learned, I've been trying to learn it all my life, but when I first started training as a medic, was we learned about the 5 There are 6 levels of grief. And one of the things I learned, or I began to learn, was that in order to heal, you have to feel. Everyone's heard that, right? You haven't? Yeah. Well, I was thinking the community, the family, the friends, even the rituals, gives us a setting or a container where we can openly feel or express our grief. Just like Haripriya called me up the other night. She said it's the 1-year memorial, and I'm just feeling so overwhelmed, with the grief. And it's been 1 year. Well, like you said, these feelings may appear for the rest of our life, and that's okay. In fact, if we didn't have feelings, what would we be? I mean, that's bhakti is feeling. It's the heart. And that means we have to be willing to feel every feeling. And if we're not willing to feel it, then the heart closes, and then we're stuck. And that not only affects our quality of happiness in this life, but it actually affects our own spiritual practice of bhakti. And so how do we keep an open heart when there's pain? And we don't learn that. Of course, if you grow up in the Vedic culture with Krishna and everyone where they have the process of grief, and they have a container to deal with it, then as a young boy or girl, you learn how to grieve from a young age. But a lot of us didn't grow up like that. So this ISV community is so important, and I'm fortunate to have it. That we can have a memorial ceremony where not only Haripriya can express their grief, but all those can express their grief and also support each other in that process, that it's okay to feel the pain. And then when we can feel the pain, now we can move forward, and that helps us in all the areas of human life where we're going to experience loss and we're going to experience grief. So I'm, when Haripriya called me and said, would you please come to the memorial, I jumped at the chance and the opportunity to be able to support her in her grief, and also to be in a situation where we can all grieve together, and in this way grow. And where the heart can remain open, and it's an essential part of human life, but also spiritual life. They're not really separate. And otherwise that energy gets stuck there. One thing I found interesting was I was watching a hospice worker. At one point I was thinking of going into hospice after I retired. Into hospice work. I never ended up doing it, but I watched this one video where a hospice worker was dealing with the family of a loved one that was about to die. And there were young children there. And one of the children asked, what is death? And where's my mother going to go? It was about an 8-year-old girl. And the hospice worker took the boy into another room. And they sat down together, and she said to him, this was so simple but so effective. She said to him, you know your mother's in the other room, don't you? And he said, yes. And he goes, well, your mother's in the other room, but you'll never be able to see her again. And this is death. So your mother's still somewhere, and you still feel the connection to her, but for now you won't be able to see her. And the boy understood that. And so I was thinking about connection as well. Even if we don't, we may believe, we may have different spiritual or philosophical beliefs about the soul or about no soul or where we go or that. But within the heart itself, we do feel connection, and we are connected. And as long as we allow the pain to arise whenever it's going to arise, that feeling of separation or sadness or anger or denial, and we're there to be with it, it passes. And then the heart stays open. And in this way, we are moving forward and we're not stuck. So I just wanted to share that. And thank you for being here. Hare Krishna.
Just a quick point to corroborate. I had compiled a list of what counselors do or recommend. And one of them was to notice various emotions, to clarify which emotions the person's feeling, and then identify which coping skills might be most helpful for that griever in the moment. For example, they said some people experience feelings of guilt when somebody's passed away, perhaps about how they feel or because of unresolved issues. So their point was when you identify distinct emotions, you can work through them. So I thought that related well with your point about what you can feel, you can heal. And that's not just to lump it all in, but also to be very specific about, like, what are you feeling now? Or for oneself, what am I actually feeling, and to analyze it. And the more, as you were saying, you recognize it, the more you can actually deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you. That's Sangha, really, where we feel safe to be ourselves and to express our feelings, not only with grief, but whatever is going on. But that's otherwise that energy can get stuck, and then that becomes a block to our progress as human beings, or also as, spiritual practitioners. Ijo desu.
Narakula. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you, Haripriya and Lalita and Bhumika and Bir Krishna Prabhu for having this here with all of us at the temple. I offer you my heartfelt pranams. I could really relate to a lot of what Prabhu was saying, and then what Satyadev so nicely added to it about feeling the grief and not getting stuck in it, allowing the heart to process that and to process it with loved ones, process it with us, because it helps not just you, but it helps us as well. And I have lovely memories of Haripriya, Ma. For so long, I didn't know her name. She was just Ma. And so when we visited her, at home, where she passed, it was a truly spiritual atmosphere. She was amazing. She was just in bliss. She was concerned about others, still wanting to feed us. And she was joyful. When we were in the yatra, we were speaking about jubilating. Ma was jubilating. She was dancing. We've seen that video, many of us. She was singing, she was dancing. It was all Krishna Katha. It was all Krishna Katha. And as I've said to Haripriya a few times, how fortunate you are to feel that grief, to be missing your Ma so much, all of you girls, and Bir Krishna Prabhu, to have had that loving, deep relationship with her. I know it's painful, but it would be more painful if you didn't have that, if you didn't have that heart-opening experience, if you didn't have that love that she gave you. And she must be very, wherever she is, she would be very proud of you all. You're continuing on the values that she imbibed in you, always looking out for others, distributing prasadam, learning the verses, learning the reading, all the things that she so imbibed in you from a very, very young age. Especially after the days and weeks after Ma passed, Haripriya had so many nice memories that she shared with me of when she was a little girl, and Ma, teaching her how to roll chapatis, and not just for the family but for the temple from a young age, And so, Bhumika, you took such nice care. And Lalita, you came home, you came back from England, back and forth, all those times to be with her. It's wonderful to see the close-knit relationships that you all have and to allow us to be a part of that. So, Ma was quiet. She sat right back there on the bench. She'd come in on Sundays, and that was her seat. That's where she'd be. And I never knew of her spiritual strength, but it was so obvious as she was getting ready to pass. You felt it, you observed it, you saw it, and I think that all of us benefited from that. She was such a wonderful example in her life and in her passing. And so it just shows we don't have to be, make a big deal of what it is we're doing. We just do it and have that meditation of wanting to serve the devotees. When I think of Ma, that's what I think of. She wanted to serve the Vaishnavas. She wanted her girls to serve the Vaishnavas. And that's what you're all doing. So we're very fortunate to have you as part of our community. Lalita, we hope, I can't see Lalita, I don't know where she is. Oh, there she is. We hope that you'll come as often as you can, because you are a part of this community. We love you like we love your sisters and your dad and your Ma. So thank you all, and whatever way this community can support you all, as you've done for us, we hope we can continue to do that, and take to heart what was most important with Haripriya, and go forward with that in our daily lives. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I want to actually thank Ma for giving such a beautiful community, because today, again, with the blessings of all of you and such a nice teachings of Vaisheshika Prabhu, Satyadev Prabhu, and Mother Nirkula sharing their heart, then how we can continue in this process and stay connected with the Ma, and also what she valued in her life, the process of bhakti, the Krishna prema, how we can go on for the rest of the days that we have here and make her feel proud. So I had written down the offering, but I won't be able to speak much. But I will have my husband, Radhavalla Prabhu, come say a few words, and then we'll go into Nacharya Marman. And by the time Radhavalla Prabhu comes, I will tell you one thing that I have learned from my Ma is be simple. I can see my Ma was simple, very, very clear, and very clever. And clever, I realized it after she left. The whole time I was thinking, I didn't really think much, but I really noticed that she was simple and clear. Because she was simple, this is it. I have the path. Now I should just get on it. I should just determine I have a guru, I have a Krishna, and this is what ultimately it matters to me. And she was clear to hold on to that. Anything happens, she would go in front of the deities. She will talk to the deities. And this is how she dedicated and practiced her life. So that's how I know that she was she had a very clear intuition in her heart, and the mercy of the Lord was flowing through her. So I just wanted to pray with all of your blessing that we can also be simple, clear, and continue to serve the Guru and Sankirtan movement with the cleverness that she followed in her life. Okay, Radha Vallabh Prabhu.
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, I'm also a little moved by the occasion. Sorry. I wanted to say exactly what Nirukla Mataji spoke actually. She was happy when she was leaving. That, especially that day, Malini Mataji was there. She was here. Okay, Malini Mataji was there, and Chakhuvan was there, Bhumika. And so she was expecting for Prabhu and Nirukla Mataji to arrive, meet them, and then leave. She was saying, I'll meet them, then I'll go. And so we told her a date. This is the date they're going to come back. But because of the day-night, international date, and the things turned out to be 24 hours different, and she was expecting that day to come. They're actually coming one day later. So she was kind of expecting them. And that whole day, Shamrapa Prabhu and Mataji, they came. And Mataji sang for at least 6-7 hours, Kirtan, that evening. And Prabhu, Koladev Prabhu came, he chanted entire Bhagavad Gita for 3-4 days, he chanted. Then that day evening, so because she was expecting so much, we played that Nachira Marman again for her. And she was going down, her one part of the body was not working, but her hearing was very perfect. And when she heard what I felt, that she felt that they are here. And she became very jubilant. And after that, around 10:30, this thing happened. Then we are tired, like me and Supriya. Around 12:15, we went to take a rest. And Chakub and Malini Mataji was sitting, Malini Mataji was holding her hand and chanting Hare Krishna. And after that kirtan, she struggled to leave. She was struggling to leave to meet them. She stopped struggling. And Malini Mataji was chanting, and she just left. She became very peaceful. She didn't struggle to live anymore. And she was happy. She was very happy. And there are so many, each of you have some experience some way. Her simplicity, her desire to give, and things like that. I also have, although I came very late in the family, but I had few, and very sweet. So I think I'll just stop here. Hare Krishna, thank you for coming. Hari Bol.
So, when we went to visit Haripriya, she wanted to hear Nacharan Marman. And we sang that for her. And I understand that the others came and sang it for her too. So Haripriya asked me to sing it on this day for her again, if it's all right with all of you. What happened to the instruments? Like, is there a bag? I hear it. I don't know if there's a way to sing this song with a mood of melancholy. But that's not necessary, because he who reasons ill say that Vaishnavas die, for Vaishnavas die to live, and living try to spread the holy name around. Who's going to play the cowbell? You want to play? Doyal Nitai Chaitanya Bole Nach Re Amar Man Doyal Nitai Chaitanya Bole Nach Re Amar Man Nachari Armarman Nachari Armarman Nachari Armarman Nachari Armarman Hey! Marman, Nacharya Marman, Nacharya Marman. Soyam Sai Chaitanya, Nacharya Marman. Takon Krishna Name Ruche Habe Guche Be Bandan. Takon Krishna Name Ruche Habe Guche Be Bandan. Anuragto Habe Hey. Anuragto Habe Hey. Krishna Name Anuragto Habe Hey. Krishna Name Anuragto Habe Hey. Goyanta Chaitanya Prabhu Marman. Goyanta Chaitanya Prabhu Marman. Nacharya Marman, Nacharya Marman, Nacharya Marman, Nacharya Marman. Goyanta Chaitanya Prabhu Nacharya Marman. Takon Anayasse Sapal Habe Jivera Jivan. Takon Anayasse Sapal Habe Jivera Jivan. Jivanto Niche Hey. Jivanto Niche Hey. Krishna Rati Bina Jivanto Niche Hey. Krishna Rati Bina Jivanto Niche Hey. Goyanta Chaitanya Prabhu Nacharya Marman. Goyanta Chaitanya Prabhu Nacharya Marman. Nacharya Marman, Nacharya Marman, Nacharya Marman, Nacharya Marman. Goyanta Chaitanya Prabhu Nacharya Marman. Jai Vrindavane Radha Shamir Abhidarshan. Jai Vrindavane Radha Shamir Abhidarshan. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Yang vapi swaram bhavam tajatyanti kalevaram tam tam evaite kunteya sadatad bhavitaha. We live this life by our own choice. We go certain places. We may develop habits that are hard to break, but we do get choices who to associate with and what kinds of food to eat. The information is there, and sometimes we're weak and we don't take the information. But those who try mightily to align themselves with the instructions of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam begin to walk the path that is acknowledged by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita when he says, Api chet sudaracharo bhajate mam ananyabhak sadhureva samantabhyasam yad vyavasito hisa. But if you're trying to walk this path, even though you do it imperfectly, I consider you a sadhu and everybody else must also. What to speak of some who are born with great advantages spiritually. They come into an environment where the holy name is prevalent, where it's the norm to take shelter of Krishna, and then they take shelter of a spiritual master and they hold forth and keep their vows throughout life. And when it comes time to leave the world, there is a joyfulness that actually I've done everything that I could to fulfill Krishna's instructions, to carry out his instructions, to serve the devotees. And we saw this in Haripriya Ma, this joyfulness that she was being now transported by Krishna's personal hand back home to more service at his lotus feet. And therefore, in these words, we learn that if we use this lifetime to follow the footsteps of Gauranga Mahaprabhu, and after all, that's what Srila Prabhupada came to teach, Gauravani Prasharane came to teach what are the words of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what are his teachings. And everyone follows this path. Then we'll come to this point at the end where we're very joyful to move on to the next set of circumstances where we can serve Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in fact, in this verse, those who take shelter of Gauranga Mahaprabhu and the Sankirtan movement then come out in the next life in the pastimes of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. So on this day of remembering Haripriya, we joyfully pray to follow in her footsteps, to always remember Krishna through simple service, to always pray before the deities, to remember Krishna the way she did. And as we do so, we'll get more and more confirmation from within the heart that we're following the right path beyond all the complexities of the material world. And we'll hear this voice deep inside. It starts softly, and it gets louder and louder in confirmation that you too are following the footsteps of the great souls and shall go back to Godhead. And we listen carefully right now, we can hear that sound vibration. It goes something like this. Gaura Kripa Hare Hare, 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 Gaur Kripa Hare Hare, Gaur Kripa Hare Hare, Gaura Kripa Hare Hare, Gaur Kripa Hare Hare, Gaura Vitai Chaitanya Krishna Shri Amana, Gaura Vitai Chaitanya Krishna Shri Amana. Marman, Nashri Marman, Nashri Marman, Nashri Marman. Hey! Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Bol. Nitai Gaura Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Jai Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jaya Prabhupada. Goyal Nitai Chaitanya Bolu Nach Re Amar Goyal Nitai Chaitanya Bolu Nach Re Amar Nachari Armarman Nachari Armarman Nachari Armarman Nachari Armarman Hey! Nachari Armarman Nachari Armarman Nachari Armarman Go Premanande Nitai Gaura Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo Haripriya Ma ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai, Gaur Premanande. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Gaurnitai, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Shri Lakshmi Nrsimhadev. If you so desire, please give us the wherewithal to always support one another in our journey back to Godhead amidst all circumstances, including those in which we are grieving deeply. Please also protect Haripriya and give her all service in her next destination. And please let us follow in her footsteps. And please enliven all of us to take to the path of pure devotional service, to be ready for the final moment as she was. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Vanchakalpadruscha kripasinabhevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. And if I'm not mistaken, is there another? There's prasadam. Please come take prasadam. Ekarina shanti pure prabhu advaitera gare tui prabhu bojane boshila shakori ashwadana prabhu bole bhakta gana Eshak Krishna Asvadhilo Heno Shaka Shraddane Krishna Prema Ashemane Se Preme Goro Ashvada Jagda Buddhi Parihari Dasara Bhojana Kori Hari Hari Goro Sarva Prasadi Govinda Nambrahmi Vaishnave Sapunya Vakamrajan Vishwato Navijaya Prasadi Sarva Vishwana Adiyakyo Padayate Prasanate Prasoyashi Upayavati Swaya Pravishta Shakanda Bhakava Karkashitaha Utita Shri Mahaprasad Ki Gaur Premanande Nitai Gaura Hari Bo Hari Bo Hari Bo Nitai Gaura Hari Bo. Prasadam for all in the picnic area, just outside. Pleasantly cool, nice fresh air. Please, have a good time. Hare Krishna. Lord Premanande Hari Bo.